Hello, good morning. And for those who are here with us, thank you for being here. Dr. Lynn, thank you for being here on the Black Male Impact, as our goal is to increase our impact, especially as Black men. But for the listeners and for those who are viewing us, please share this with your audience as the conversation today, I can guarantee that you will gain something from this conversation. But before we get into the conversation itself, I want to briefly introduce Dr. Lynn. And just for those who are here, my name is Richard A. Cross, Dr. Cross, and we hope to have a great conversation today. Currently, Dr. Marvin Lynn is the serving dean and professor in the School of Education and Human Development at University of Colorado, Denver. He's also an academic leader, scholar, cultural critic, and vocal artist. Also, he's also a community leader and a proud father of three successful young men. But before we get into the questions today, I will ask Dr. Lynn to briefly share more about himself, just for you guys to know him a little bit better if you haven't as yet. So, Dr. Lynn, please share with the audience. So, before we get into the conversation today.
Sure. And thank you so much, Dr. Cross, for having me here. It's really an honor, and I have a lot of respect for the work that you have attempted to do around Black males and Black male leadership, and just glad to be part of this effort.
Yes,
So
sir.
thank you. Um, I'm an educator. I've always been an educator ever since I was a child. I wanted to be a teacher. And so I started my career as an elementary teacher um, 32 years ago now. Let's see, yeah, thereabout. And gravitated from that into higher education, where I became a researcher focusing on the work and lives of Black male educators, but also interested in um, African American students and sort of the factors that promoted their learning. And so I began to look really at teaching practices from the standpoint of being a researcher, and then moved into administration. And I've been in full time administration in higher education since 2011. So going on about 14 years this year with that, and really focusing again on teacher education and trying to ensure that our students have the teachers they need. And so I'm happy to be here to lend my expertise, to lend my voice from the standpoint of folks in the field of education.
Okay, man. Thank you for being here, and thanks also for your commitment to being in education, and for all those years that you have been serving. One of the things that we have heard many times is that we need more Black men in education. So I really have to commend you, for your service and for being there for over 30 years. That's an accomplishment in itself. So, again, thanks for being here. And for the listeners who are here with us, I appreciate you taking the time to tune in to this conversation today. So, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about a series of different areas where Black men can make an impact. So, I want to start with leadership. So, my question to you is, what does authentic leadership look like for Black men, and how can we embrace it in our daily lives?
Yeah, when I think about that question, when I think about the question of authentic, and to me, when I think about what it means to be authentic, it means you're real. It's to be real, and real means honest and transparent and open. And I think anything that we do in life, but particularly leadership, we have to approach in an honest and transparent and open way. And I think Black men have the opportunity to really lead in that way in terms of demonstrating what that looks like. And I try to do that. I think that if you were to talk to many of my colleagues, they would use those words to describe me because those are the words that I sort of function by. And it's very important to also be earnest in terms of thinking about why leadership matters to you. If we are seeking leadership roles because we aspire to be powerful or we aspire to have a lot of money, I can tell you right now, it's not worth it, right? Because power can be stripped away in an instant. And then all the money that comes with it can also go away, right? Because even if you are in a leadership position and you have power and authority over others, somebody has power and authority over you,
Correct.
and can make that call to snap that role away or those dollars away from you in an instant. So that can't be the goal. The goal has got to be about, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's got to be about really making a difference and showing up as the person that you really are, but also being willing to shift and to change and to grow. Particularly if you're someone like myself who has moved around to different institutions in different parts of the country, you have to understand the context in which you are leading and how that particular community functions. What's the history? What are the sort of pressure points, right, that you have to kind of avoid? And how do you lead in a way that's responsive to people's cultural and social and community and needs? Um, how do you lead in a way that's responsive to the times? Like right now in education, we are all being hit by what's happening in Washington, D.C., which is where I happen to be at the moment. I'm in Washington, D.C. And, um, and there's this constant churn around the different executive orders and how that is impacting us or not. And my job has been to be an advocate for my community that I lead, and to sometimes push back on leadership at other levels that says you have to stop in focusing on recruiting diverse educators. That you can no longer um, teach a curriculum that centers equity and social justice, right? And I have had to push back on those things and say to my community, that is who we are, that's what we are about, and we're going to keep being about that. If we have to make minor adjustments to language to address some of those concerns, we might do that, but we're not going to change who we are in
Correct.
the face of what I would call tyranny, right? And so I think in this moment, Black male leaders need to, as we say, stand on business
Correct. Correct.
and keep marching forward, but be willing to make adjustments and changes as needed, as long as they don't change who we are and what we're about.
I really appreciate your perspective on leadership, and just to highlight a few parts that you have shared about being authentic. And one thing that I believe, we must be ourselves wherever we are because we're always representing ourselves. And also that you have shared that leadership, we should not go into leadership seeking power and to control people. I think, as you mentioned, that that can take away from us at any time, is that we have to go in there with the willingness to empower and uplift those who we are entrusted to lead. And I totally agree with you, because especially as Black men, where there are so many things that have been put against us, or we have been labeled a certain way. So we have to show up and in a way that's different from the stigmas and the labels and the stereotypes when it comes to us as Black men. So I really appreciate you, sharing your perspective. And sometimes, as you mentioned, that we have to push back, especially when they are not in alignment with our values. Because if we go with things that are not in alignment with our values, it's like we are agreeing to things that we know that is not right, especially and when we're thinking about moving forward and making the impact that we believe is possible. So my next question to you is, how can we empower other Black men to step into leadership roles within their communities?
I think as you indicated, oftentimes black men are not seen as capable, right, of leadership. We get a lot of different frames sort of thrown on us, right? We get the frame of violence thrown on us, right? We're too violent. We get the frame of undereducated. A lot of folks throw this frame on us that suggests that we cannot be educated or that we're uneducable, right? And that we're not deserving of certain opportunities. And so those opportunities go elsewhere, and black boys and black men get carted off to other spaces, like prisons and other places like that. And so we have to first of all recognize that black boys and black men have the ability to lead and can and should be given those opportunities. And so that's first, because that is not happening I think on a broad scale. And then I think we can then encourage leadership in young men. As an educator working with third and fourth grade and kids and so on, I really try to encourage and bring out leadership skills in young men. I do that with my own sons. I have three sons, and encouraging them to communicate openly and transparently, to express themselves in um, an appropriate way, and to be willing to discuss and talk about hard things, right? But to do it in a way that people can hear and understand, and not be afraid to challenge injustice, to speak up. I have one son who is a writer, and so he may not get into a verbal argument about it, but he'll write an essay. And when he has an essay right now that's been published in the campus newspaper at Notre Dame, where he's a student, right? And he basically, it's an appeal for empathy around what's happening with our migrant brothers and sisters right now.
Okay.
And now this has gone viral, right? And so it's all over the country, people are talking about what he's written around this appeal to empathy, and it's one way in which he is showing leadership on a very important issue, right? And to encourage them to speak with their own voice and to speak out against injustice, um, and to recognize that they have a responsibility. I say to my kids all the time, okay, that situation right there, as we look at any number of situations, we may be like climate, for example. I'll say to them, it is going to be up to you to fix this, because I'm at a certain age and I'm probably not going to see it be addressed in the remaining years I have. But in the next 50, 60, 70 years that you have on this earth, 80, whatever that it might be, you have an opportunity to really step into this issue and lead us towards some kind of change. And I say that to all the time to the younger generation. You have an opportunity to make this a better place. I expect you to do it. And so, one, recognize that black boys and men who are emerging as adults can lead and
Correct.
should be respected, and expected to do as such. And then to lay that expectation on them that here's what you have an opportunity to do when you step into this leadership role, and to provide that coaching and that encouragement, and that mentorship. I think that people need to become good leaders. I think is very, very important for that next generation.
And thanks for that perspective, and I do agree with you. We have to be the example. We have to be the ones leading the way for the next generation, because it's easier for them to be what they see. It's a great thing for your sons to see you in the position, in the leadership role, so they can start modeling, what they see. But as you have shared, that you have done the same things, for other young men who you encounter on your journey. And I do believe as black men, it's important that we do that. Demonstrate it. not just tell them, because we have to empower them, as you mentioned, that they have to know that their voice matters,
Hmm.
that they can be the change now. It's not when they reach a certain place, but they can. But it's important that we who are ahead of them, let them know that yes, what you have to share that makes a difference needs to be shared. You don't have to be in a leadership role or any particular position, as you have shared with your son. And what he wrote about, the immigrants went viral, and a lot of people are talking about it. So if he weren't encouraged to do what he can do, he may not be out there, voicing his opinion, but whichever way he can. And that's what we have to encourage our young people or even adults. You don't have to do it as how others are doing it, but you have to find the way that resonate with you and how you can make that difference. And because leadership right now is really really important, especially for us, especially when it comes to dismantling the stereotypes and the limitations that have been placed on us as black men. We have to demonstrate leadership, so the next generation can see through us, that it is possible, to make changes, to create an impact, because the world is looking, and now is our opportunity to show the world who we are, who we truly are. I think they really know who we are and the impact that we can make, but it's best for us to show the younger generation, because they have been conditioned to think a certain way. So it's important, that we share with them or demonstrate, for them to see us in a light that will empower them,
And
to be.
and that really is a two-way street, right? Because as a person of the older generation, you have to be willing to listen,
Okay.
um, to what they have to say, and what their concerns are. It was my son's choice to take up this issue. I didn't say, I need you to do this. It was his choice. And my job was to support him to take up the issues that are concerned to him, to give him feedback and input on how to do that. But it is very important that we listen, because sometimes we get into this kind of one directional communication with young folks, and it can be a problem. And any of us who are parents know that we've had to sometimes back off and say, okay, I want to hear what you have to say. Because when we don't listen, when we get into the mode of just telling them, and again, demonstrating this is the way to be, they have different ideas about that. And I do think we have to be willing to hear their side of the story. And once that trust is gained, there's an opportunity, I think, for us to build that relationship such that we can have the impact that we're talking about.
And I'm really glad you say that, and that's a great reminder, for all of us, because sometimes we think our opinions are the only opinions. It's important that we listen, especially to those who are around us, and listening to the younger generation, really encourage them to really, give their greatness or their perspective and insights, to the world, because we first validate what they are trying to do. So it's important. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that is really important as we go forward on this journey to make a impact. My next question to you, and it's still on leadership: what role does economic empowerment play in driving meaningful, social change?
I mean, it's critical, and that is something that we lack. I think economic empowerment in the Black community has been something that we have struggled with. There's been an intentional effort to keep our communities weak, economically, politically, socially, in every way, and that really goes back to slavery, right, where African people were brought to this context to economically empower the United States, right? And I think all these other economies up and down the Americas and other parts of the world. Uh, but there was an intentional effort to economically disempower us through our labor, which was stolen, um, and uh, and we have not ever been compensated for that. I mean, we talked the last time about reparations, right? And so um, we have been the force behind other people's economic empowerment. And in doing so, our economic empowerment has been put down. And this also extends to the continent of Africa, right? And you can look at Haiti, you can look at all across the Caribbean, where um, um, the African context globally, that African people have been used and abused in this way. And economics has really been at the center of it. It's really been about growing economies in Europe and the Americas and other places for the benefit of other people to our own sort of detriment as a community. And so um, economic empowerment hasn't really been a reality for us on any large scale. And you can look at history when there were, like, Black Wall Street. What happened to Black Wall Street, right? It was bombed and destroyed, right, in Oklahoma. When there were opportunities for Black people to sort of step forward as a community, and you saw evidence of economic growth, it was put down and destroyed. You think about the highways across the United States of America and where they were built. They were built through, for the most part, Black communities that were at some point thriving, right? And, and so there's been this exploitation of Black labor through slavery, and then what happened after that. And then there's also been this, I think, intentional effort to destroy sites of Black economic empowerment that have existed throughout history. And now we are in a context where there's all this policy that's emerging, right? That's intended to hide the truth and to keep us from having conversations about our real history. And so Black people, I think, are going to have to come together and support Black businesses and support Black communities to begin to thrive economically, so that we can continue to have that voice and continue to do the work that we need to do to advance our community.
And I again agree with you 100%. We have been um, hurt economically, yes, and but you shared a valid point that we can do, and that is to support each other. We know some of the atrocities that we have experienced as Black people, and how we have been exploited, and we haven't been having the same access to advancement as other groups and stuff like that. But as you shared, one thing that we can do as we go forward is to support each other. That's one thing that, and we have to take that really serious. If we're going to progress, because I think we do have some resources. We may not have all the resources that we want, but we do have resources amongst us. Especially our spending power. So if we are have that ability, so we have to utilize it in a way that it will empower our communities, so we can achieve goals that is possible and will help us to advance. So that's one thing that I really want to highlight, because I think we have to start look at that piece. Because we may not be able to control what others do, but we must control what we can do, knowing that we may not get the same treatment like everyone else, but it's important, as you mentioned, that we support each other. So my next question to you, being that supporting each other, um, how can we collaborate effectively and amplify our efforts and reach more people?
How can we collaborate?
Yes, effectively, to amplify our efforts.
Yeah, I think collaboration can sometimes be a hard thing for us because we've been so excluded and mistreated sometimes in other spaces. that we can become distrustful of each other and not necessarily open to collaboration because we've had such bad experiences out there in the world. And so part of the question of, as a Black leader who has moved around and lived in different communities, and there's always been that period of trying to get to know people and trying to open up doors. And for me, it's always been a challenge of overcoming our history. If I enter into a university space where there's been a history of negative relationships between that university and the Black community, then people are less open, right, to talk to me as I show up at the door as a new leader. And so I've experienced that, and a lot of the work that I do is about developing that trust and recognizing that history as being what it is, not denying that. Sometimes institutions, be they universities or businesses or other, will try to deny the truth of their history. And I've always sort of been willing to recognize that, put that on the table, and say, yes, that is correct. And people are often shocked, that as an institutional leader, that I'm willing to accept the history of racism and discrimination that universities, for example, have participated in against Black communities. And to me, that's a starting point of recognizing that truth. But it should not be a barrier, right? It should be. To me, it should open a door to say, how can we work together? Yeah, we recognize history. Now we want to change that history and function in a different way, and we want to be able to work together to improve what's happening in our communities, and what kind of strategies can we come up with together to really make those enhancements. And sometimes the challenge is that there's that door of trust doesn't always open up right away, and so I've learned to be patient and to wait and to continue to show up and to engage and to be a participant in whatever way I can. I was at a we call it a parade in Denver, the Martin Luther King Jr. annual parade. And it just, every year it's like on the coldest day of the year. And we're outside, freezing, but celebrating the life of Martin Luther King. And every Black community or leader that, in the area comes out in the cold, and we marched together in the service of social justice and recognizing King's legacy. And it was especially important this year, given what we're facing in Washington D.C. Right, and so people were really coalescing around making sure that we are committed to working together to fight against some of the stuff that we're going to see coming out of Washington, which I needed that as a leader myself. Um, but I remember being asked if I would hold one of those yellow ribbon things, just to keep the crowd from the stage, right? And I could have said, "Oh no, I'm an institutional leader from University of Colorado, Denver. I can't do." I said, "No, I'll do whatever I need to do to be part of the movement, part of the conversation." So I was standing there for a good amount of time, just holding this yellow tape to keep the crowd from the stage, really as part of like security detail. And I thought, hey, if that's what I have to do to be part of the conversation, to be part of the solution, to be part of um, of moving forward with something positive, then I'll do that. And I just and that's my standpoint at this point. I don't have to be leading the conversation in the community. If I can be part of it, if I can stand there and hold the door, whatever I have to do to keep the
Yeah.
conversation going and to support the process, I'm going to do that because I think that collaboration and working together with folks who are advancing social justice is key. And I'm willing to work with our people to do that in any way possible.
And I'm just going to highlight 2 points from what you shared. And it's when it comes to collaboration, as you say, we have experience, um, we have bad experiences. So it can cause the distrust amongst others, and it can prevent the collaboration that's needed. And also you have mentioned, which I also believe, as you shared, as a leader, it's not always to be the person in the front. Sometimes you can just be in the room and support the movement that's going on. And I think, if we develop that mindset, it will, help us to be better at collaborating with others. We have to remove the ego, because, we may not have all the answers. We don't. No one, you know, have all the answers. But it's important that we are willing to be in spaces that others are doing the work and
Yeah.
can step back and let that person do the work and participate or say things when we, maybe ask. And I think that is important, especially if we're going to develop the trust and collaborate with others, knowing that we don't have to always be at the front, or be the leader in that space. We can participate. We can also be there to cheer the person on who is leading the change or the impact, or whatever is happening in our community, to make a difference. So I really want to highlight those two parts, but also, which you mentioned, sometimes we go in an environment knowing what the culture is like, and we have
Mhm.
to also understand that, and sometimes
Mhm.
even speak up on what's happening there, because it shows individuals that what's happening, and you're willing to work with them, to make a difference, to make progress going forward.
Yeah, it really requires humility on our part. Is my mother always said, "There's no big eyes and little U's," right? And at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. And so, whatever your role is, whatever your educational background is, and it's really not about that. It's really about, if you're going to be part of a community, you have to be humble, and you have to be really committed to working to advance that community in a powerful way.
Man, that's a great reminder, and knowing that, as you share that, you had the foundation early, knowing that it doesn't matter your level of success or qualification, and sometimes I think we do, because we use, our level of success and qualification as, benchmark, and sometimes, as you mentioned, it reduces the humility, as also, as you said, that we're all humans, and we have to acknowledge the humanity in others. It doesn't matter if they don't have the qualification or the success, because sometimes what we need to hear, can come from someone who doesn't have the success or the qualification, because anyone can share what we need in the moment, to move
Mhm.
forward, because we're all being used by God. And, we don't know who the message is going to come through. So we
Right,
have to be open, to listening, as you mentioned earlier,
right.
that listening is a key, part of what we need to do as we
Yeah,
go forward.
yeah. And with us, these divisions around class and all of that are false, right? I mean, you know, um, even you might meet what you think is the most elite black person, most wealthiest black person, most educated black person. We are all connected to somebody who is on the opposite end of that, right? And you can talk to people like Oprah Winfrey, a billionaire, and she can tell you about cousins and her own mother who were not educated people, were not wealthy people, right? And same with me. And so for me to walk around like, I can't connect with my community because of a degree, or a title is ridiculous, because I when I go home to talk to my family, people don't have those degrees and titles, and am I going to not talk to my mom? Because what I mean, and that's the situation that we are in, right? Is that our families are complex and diverse, even folks that have been, middle class. Like I'm first generation middle class, right? And so there are people that I know who have multiple generations of middle class people in their family. But even in those circumstances, they have folks in their extended family that struggle, that have difficulty, right? And so we have to be open across these quote unquote class lines, which I don't think are real in the first place, to communicate, to connect, and to work together.
Yeah, man, that is important. We have to realize that, um, we must treat each person we encounter, with respect and dignity,
Yep.
despite the qualification. Because as you mentioned in the beginning, sometimes we think, being at the top and having all this success, anything can happen. So it's important that we have that respect for others. As there's a quote that states that I'm not going to say it correctly, but is to treat the janitor, just as how you treat the CEO. They are all human beings, and it shows more about who you are when you can treat the janitor with the same level of respect as you treat the CEO. That really say a lot more about you, than anything else.
And recognizing that that janitor probably knows a lot more about the culture and climate of that place than that CEO does.
Correct.
Um, Janitors tend to be around longer than CEOs, right? And so they have a lot of knowledge that you need to trust and respect and value. And if you dismiss them and mistreat them, then not only you're closing yourself off to that knowledge, but you're also damaging a relationship with an important person. Who a lot I see a lot of schools now, and I see this particularly in the context of white schools that are recognizing the powerful role that janitors, for example, or custodians, we now call them, play in mentoring students,
Correct.
right? That they are very critical in terms of, hey, now that's not right, right? Because if teachers are in the classroom, it's a janitor who is seeing what's going on in that hallway and intervening sometimes, right? And coaching students to make better choices. And
Correct.
so schools that recognize the power that janitors play in mentoring students, particularly in terms of encouraging them to do the right thing, to go to class, to not engage in fights or whatever they might be doing, is absolutely critical. And to dismiss that person because they may not have a degree or whatever is absolutely ridiculous. And I think we have to be very careful about that, especially as Black people, because those are, like I said, are false divisions in the first place.
Yeah, that is important. And that point that you brought forth, with schools now seeing the value of
Mhm.
custodians, the janitors and stuff like that. I think that is important. As you mentioned, sometimes the janitors are there much longer
Yeah,
than the CEO. And but as leaders, it's important, that we acknowledge everyone in the same light, especially when we want to make a difference and we want to make a positive impact,
right.
because it's going to say a lot more about us when we treat those we think we can get something from, and those who we think we going to only want something from us. So I do agree with you on the humility, because that is important. So my next question to you: how do we balance the pressure of being a role model while remaining authentic?
Well, I think for me, um, authenticity is not a choice. There's some people that they say you fake it till you make it. Uh, I don't buy into that. I'm just who I am, and some people love it, some people hate it. And so I've gotten to where I am, not because I have um, created an image or a myth about who I am as a person. So that authenticity for me is not a choice. And there was another question tied to that though that you asked me. Why don't you to repeat that one more time if you don't mind?
How do we balance the pressure of being a role model and while being remaining authentic? So a role model and being authentic.
Yeah. So I believe that if we have good intentions in what we do as human beings, as professionals, um, and we are honest with ourselves and with others about what those intentions are and what we're trying to do, I think there are always opportunities to be a role model. What I hate, is when people who I think have done it the wrong way end up in leadership roles. I think we can look at what's happening right now in Washington, D.C., in terms of the ascendancy of some people to critical roles who have in my view, live their lives in the wrong way. Dishonesty, cheating, stealing, sexual assault, and all these things, right, are tied to folks who are in very powerful roles. And I quite frankly worry about our young men, and not just our black young men, but our young men in general, who are aspiring to leadership, looking at this as their example, right? Well, yeah, you can talk about grabbing women in private places and still become president, right? You can be convicted of 34 felonies and still lead the nation. You can, right? I mean, it's really unfortunate that we're in this place right now where people who are running the country are people that we really can't look to as being people of integrity. And I think we have to say to young people, yeah, they made it, but you don't want to do it like that, right? Because there's a certain moral vacuousness that is present, that and that there's emptiness there. There's a lack of vision for humanity, right? That you find that is not what our young people want to mimic. And so it's not about leadership at any cost or by any means necessary. It's about doing things in a way that are going to advance humanity, advance society, that are going to really make a positive contribution. And at the end of the day, if you get into a position because you had to lie and steal and cheat your way there, uh, you know, everything comes back, everything comes full circle. And that is going to reveal itself to be, I think, a really negative thing for you and for others around you. And so I think what we want to say to young people, yes, you may see people ascending to high positions um, while lacking integrity in every way, but you can make a different choice. And there's still an opportunity for you to do this in a different way. Because when you look at what happens at the end of the day in situations like that, that never ends well.
Yeah.
And so um, I think that's the kind of critical place we're in right now. Is it's trying to help young people understand that leadership done on the basis of integrity and truth and honesty and commitment to social justice is still important, even in the face of what we're dealing with at this moment.
Yeah, as I just want to point out one of the um, just the quote that we mentioned about was raised to treat the CEO, the janitor, with the same respect as the CEO. I just want to highlight that comment that was shared by David, which we spoke about. But as you talk about, have demonstrating that integrity and being that leader, and get there not on false pretense,
Mm-hmm.
just to be in leadership role, just to be powerful. We have to sorry, demonstrate those characteristics. It's not by any means necessary. We have
Mm-hmm.
to know that we are setting the example for the next generation. But
Yes.
we have seen it many times where people ascend to leadership roles and to positions of power, but they have performed a lot of unscrupulous things to get there, which you have pointed out that it comes back on them. May
Mm-hmm.
not be immediate,
Mm-hmm.
but later on it affects them, and it's important, especially as black men. That is one thing that we have to really take in consideration. We can't look at what others are doing.
Mm-hmm.
They may get to where they are, doing all these unscrupulous things, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to know that to change certain cycles, to do the things that we know is right to get there. If we may not get there when we want to,
Right.
maybe a slower process to get there. But one thing that, man, we have to really value is, our integrity. We want to get there and know that we work our way there. We haven't put people down. We haven't done things in the wrong way to get there. And as leaders, and that's the type of leader we need right now,
Yep.
to demonstrate to the next generation. Because if we're talking about change or we're talking about progress, we have to, be that example.
Yes.
It's not just about talking about it or doing whatever by any means necessary to get there, knowing that what we're doing is not the right thing, and treating people bad, to get there, because as you mentioned, it's going to come back on us. So it's important, that we demonstrate, what we are talking about, and that leadership piece, and especially for us, because we've seen many bad examples.
Yeah. A lot of bad examples, and we've seen that in our community too. And we see that everywhere. For me, it's my spiritual core, right? That I protect. And I'm a Christian, so I have my Christian values, but I don't think you have to be a Christian to operate in that way. I think I see brothers who are Muslim and all different faiths, right? Who practice that same thing, but you have to believe in something other than yourself, I guess is
Correct.
what I'm saying. Because if it's all about self, right, and then that's what leads to that sort of selfish stance that some of us take, that ends up being pretty destructive. And I think believing in a higher power, whatever that is, and being connected to a kind of moral center or core that drives your decision making, is really important.
I agree. Having that moral compass is really important,
Mhm.
especially as leaders. And as you mentioned, it doesn't matter your faith, and but it's important that we have our belief
Yeah.
in a power, greater than us.
Yeah.
And I think, as leaders, that is really, really important, having that moral compass, because it really helps us as leaders to, make sure we're treating the people that we are entrusted to serve in the right way, and not to, just be all about what I can get as a person, and be selfish about just the role itself, or just the power, or just the money, because sometimes people are chasing these roles, just for the money, or just to be seen, and
Right.
always be seen, and always about who they are, and
Right.
not about the work itself.
Exactly.
So I think you shared a valid point, on leaders, and how important it is that we demonstrate integrity,
Hmm.
which goes back to the authenticity as a leader. Be the same person you are here, and the
Hmm.
same person you are when no one is watching. I
Hmm.
think that is really important. So my next question to you, from a role model standpoint, why is it important for Black men to actively mentor the next generation?
Again, I think every generation that I would say every individual, every person who's managed to have some modicum of success, has done it because of the support and mentorship of other people. And I'm a prime example of that. I've had not always black men, a lot of times black women educators who stepped in the gap for me to ensure that when I didn't have the parental support, my father died when I was very young, and my stepfather was had some difficulty, with just some challenges in life that prevented them from being deeply engaged and from serving as a role model. And so I relied on teachers who stood in that gap and said, "Hey, here's a path, and here's something that we think is going to work, and we're going to support you to get there." And so, for a lot of young people, and I was one of them, without that assistance of educators working with me and sometimes with my mom, I knew I wouldn't be where I am today, right? And so we need to be willing to stand in that gap for young people who don't have the support at home or otherwise. Um, even for young people who have that support at home, sometimes they need a different perspective. Um, Sometimes they need another mentor who is willing to show them a different way. Maybe the parent, as educated or supportive as they might be, may not have the skill set that they need to support this young person. So it's not just for kids who are like me, who may not have had the parental support. But I think that mentorship is critical, and we don't really do anything in this life without the support of other people who are more knowledgeable, who can guide us in the right direction. That's very, very critical. But again, it's also it's got to come with the understanding that younger people have opinions, they have beliefs that are different from our own. I had an experience, like I said, I had a lot of positive mentors all the way through from, I would say kindergarten up through graduate school and beyond. And they were primarily Black women educators. But I had an experience with one such educator who I still hold very dearly, who had an idea about where I should go to graduate school, and that idea was different from mine. We just disagreed about that, right? And they said, "Well, you should do this," and it was very likely that what they were recommending would have been, even in some ways, an easier path, and I would have probably gotten more scholarship support had I gone that route. But it just wasn't where I wanted to be, and it didn't line up with my vision for myself. So I went elsewhere, and I probably spent more money than I should, and things like that. But it sort of set me on the course to being where I am today. And I look back and I think, yeah, that was a good decision, even though it was more expensive and things like that. But that person sort of stopped communicating with me after I made that decision. And I thought, I appreciated that support, but wow, that really was not that's selfish mentoring, right? That you have to do exactly as I say, or I'm going to take away my support. And I think we need to not mentor like that. And as much as I appreciate the role that person played in my life, I look back on that and I think that's unfortunate that they felt the need to withdraw their support from me because I made a different choice. Because my choices, things turned out pretty good, right? So I knew what I was doing, and I knew where I wanted to be, and going where I ended up going led me to other paths, right, in terms of my research agenda and all the things that ultimately ended up being really good decisions for me. And so we got to respect young people's choices as we mentor them, and we got to be able to work with them to guide them to where they want to go, and help them make the right decisions, but also stand back and respect them when they make decisions that may be different from what we might choose.
But it goes back to what you have said about as a leader, you need to listen.
Hmm.
And because listening also empowers the person that you are sharing knowledge with,
Right.
because it's not and I do agree with you, in mentorship it's not making the person be like you, but to
Hmm.
empower the person to be the best that they can be.
Right.
And that means we have to be listening and hearing their strengths and the things that they want to do, the things that they're passionate about. Because it's not about me telling the person that, oh, you need to be a writer, you need to, go on this path to
Right.
pursue a doctoral degree in education. Suppose that person wants to be an engineer. I'm here trying to force that person in being an educator when they want to be an engineer. So I really appreciate you, bringing up that perspective, because as leaders and as mentors, it goes back to listening and be able to
Right.
help that person to become who they can be,
Right.
and don't try to make the person as they are,
Right.
as who we are, but it's to empower them to be, the best version of themselves. I do agree with you when it comes to you know being a role model, being a leader, and being a mentor, is to help the person to be the best. And also, as you've mentioned, that we are where we are not because of our own ability or our own thinking. We have been encouraged and supported by others,
Right.
so we have a responsibility to do the same for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Which, yes. Oh, I
No,
thought
I
you were
was agreeing with you. I was just agreeing with you.
okay. Yeah, it's important. So my next question to you on positive self-image: what practices can help Black men maintain a positive self-image despite societal challenges?
I think that's a really hard thing for us because all of the media that we see on TV, but also things that we listen to on the radio, whatever um, media, Apple Music or whatever it might be, Spotify. Um, there's just a lot of negative messages about Black men directed at us. And that influences how we are seen all around the world. Now, and I will say this, um, African American men in particular um, are portrayed in ways that I think I referred to earlier as violent, as stupid, as uneducated, as worthless, as lacking in value. And that message gets communicated in a lot of the movies and TV shows that we watch and that the world watches, right? And it's so embedded within our music. I have a lot of love and respect for hip hop, but I do worry about the messaging that can sometimes come from that. And I have conversations with my sons about that, about how do you listen to some of the stuff, but also recognize that the messaging is a tool for debasing and devaluing us in a lot of ways. That's deeply embedded within some of it. Um, I had an experience of going to the continent of Africa for the first time, maybe 25 years ago. Um, yeah. And I was in graduate school at the time. And I'll be almost 26 years. And I just said I wanted to go to the motherland. I'd never done it. And so I went to Ghana and had a great time. But I remember one of the first experiences I had just being out in the community with a group of other students who are all African American students is being approached by a young man from Ghana. A young guy, must have been 16 or 17, right? And I was in my mid late 20s at the time. And he said to me, um, "You got the chronic." So he asked me, and yeah, I grew up, as some people would say, in the hood, but I was kind of on that academic trajectory, and I focused on school, and I went to church, and so I wasn't involved in a lot of things that maybe kids might be involved in places where I grew up in terms of street life or whatever. So I didn't know anything about it. I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" He was shocked that I didn't know what the chronic was. Because he had this impression from hip hop, from the movies, from wherever he gotten it, that African Americans, that when you meet them, they all smoke weed, which is what the chronic apparently is, and they're all gangsters and hip, and they talk and walk in a certain way, and they have a certain value. And I was it really was something to think that this young person from Ghana who had never been to America, that his first impression of me would be that, and again, I'm a doctoral student at UCLA, right? So, and that's in many ways how I presented myself. I mean, I wasn't trying to appear as though I was Dr. Dre, right? I've never aspired to do that, and so I don't think I was given the impression that was who I was trying to be, but that's the impression he had of black men and black American men. And I found that as I've traveled the world, for various reasons, that same impression is very consistent, right? this idea that African American men are avid drug users, that we're violent, that uh, we're what gets portrayed on TV and the movies, that we're uneducated and all these things. Um, and so that makes it really hard, I think, for us to lead and to be recognized as human beings. And so I think we have to really fight against that. We got to support media that is trying to present and build more positive images of us. And I
Correct.
do think we have to push back against media that continues to push the same tired racist narrative about black men. And we have to be willing to resist some of that media, even in the face of criticism that we can sometimes get, which suggests that, well, you don't like hip hop. And it's not I don't like hip hop. I want hip hop to be better, right? And I would like a hip hop that's a little more balanced in
Correct.
terms of the kind of messages that are being sent about us.
Correct.
And it's the same thing with radio and TV and film. We need more stories out there. We need more versions of the story that really represent a fuller perspective of black maleness. And I think African Americans in particular have become victim to that, and we have to begin to turn that around.
Yeah, man. Such a powerful statement you have made, with how black men are, just African American, being portrayed,
Hmm.
especially in media,
Hmm.
especially in the music, and how important it is, for us to resist
Hmm.
the negativity that have been portrayed on black men. And for myself, that didn't really grow up here, have been seeing those negative images. It's later on that on my journey I get to realize how systemic that is. It's not to say that, and it really affects, the black men perception of self, because just as how the world sees it, black men seeing it, and they are now taking on that which they have been shown to be
Yes,
who they are. And
yes.
the world believe that's who black men are. So it's important. And, that's one of the thing that really drive me to do this, the
Hmm.
Black Male Impact, because
Yep.
I remember when I started my doctoral journey, I didn't know that there were so many black men out there with PhDs. And I was
Hmm.
like, but this is not what we are shown. This is not what
Right,
we are seeing.
right.
So, there are black men out there who are doing the opposite of what society have been painted about who we are as black men, especially as who black Americans are. So as you mentioned, that it's important, that we cover and talk more about, what black men are doing and the accomplishments that they're having and the impact they're having, despite, where they start their journey, because you come across a lot of black men here who have started in poverty, who
Hmm.
have started with nothing, and
Hmm.
overcome those adversities and become successful and become leaders in many spaces, but no one knows who they are and what they're doing, and the stories and the journey that they have walked to be where they are. And it's by highlighting or amplifying, their voices, that, we will end up changing some of the perceptions and misconceptions that have been ongoing when it comes to us as black men, and especially as black American.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to go, but I really value the role that you are playing in that, Dr. Cross, in terms of
Yes.
really trying to put forward a different conversation that really highlights the brilliance, the greatness that exists within this group. Because I think we've been done a great disservice, and I think it's only us that's going to turn it around. So I thank you for taking leadership in that effort.
Thank you very much. And I know we're at the top of the hour. So yes, also this has been a great conversation. I know the listeners have seen several comments which I haven't get to respond to yet. So I know they have received this message well, this conversation well. So again, Dr. Lynn, I want to thank you for being here. Just to share your insight and perspective on how we can increase our impact, because it's on us to make the changes that we want to see. And listeners, as always, please continue to support us as we continue on this journey to make a difference. The Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. Again, I want to say thank you, and thanks for being here with us on this journey.
Thank you.